back. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has returned from the Middle East after stops in Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. It comes as the Biden administration continues to push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. To that end, NSC official Brett McGurk stayed behind in the region to continue working on a possible deal. Joining us now, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on the set with us. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about efforts toward any type of deal?
Well, Mika, as you know, we've been close before, and we've expressed optimism. We've gotten close to the finish line, and we haven't gotten over the finish line. So we are wary about making predictions or promises, but this is close. And with enough pushing from the outside mediators and the commitment of Israel and Hamas, we can get it done. I was in Israel, as you said, just a few days ago. I sat with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Prime Minister Netanyahu made clear at this moment Israel is ready to do this deal. So the final piece of the puzzle, from my perspective, is for Hamas ultimately to come forward with a commitment on the release of hostages in that first phase of a multi-phase deal. If we can get that done, we can have a ceasefire, we can get hostages home, and we can get a surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
David Ignatius is with us in Washington, has a question for you. David?
Jake, I just want to take you a little further into the negotiations to get this hostage release by asking, what is the blockage that's still holding up this deal? It seemed close, you said a few days ago. And how are you going to break through the remaining blockage? What are the leverage points with Hamas, which sounds like the principal remaining stumbling block?
David, it's a great question. I think there are two ways to look at the obstacles to getting across the finish line. One of the details, and the other is the big picture. On the details, they are working through the names of hostages who would come out in the first phase, the names of the prisoners who'd be released as part of the exchange, and then some specific details about the disposition of Israeli forces during the ceasefire. So small details, but those can be worked out. The big picture question is Hamas prepared to just finally say, yes, let's do it? I think we've reached that point with Israel. And the question is, can we reach that point with Hamas? And I think the entire world, including the mediators, Egypt and Qatar, need to call upon Hamas to finally say yes and do this deal.
So, Jake, what is acceptable to Israel from Hamas? What is Hamas asking for that the prime minister, that the Israelis have said, OK, I guess we can live with that if it brings our hostages home? Because, as you know, better than anyone at this table and better than most people in the world, negotiating with a terrorist group is not something you do lightly because you don't know what they'll do next.
Right. So, as you know, the deal is set out in multiple phases. The first phase is about making sure that we can get out certain key groups of hostages, the remaining women, the elderly, and the wounded and sick. So the real question right now is Hamas prepared to have that full group of people, all of those who are women, elderly, and wounded and sick, come out? And until they confirm they are prepared to do that, we remain in this position where we're close to the finish line but not over it. And you're totally right. You can't trust a terrorist group like Hamas. But we did do a hostage deal last year that got 78 hostages out. Hamas made a commitment. We verified that commitment, and then every day 10 hostages came out, and ultimately we got 78. So it is possible to do this.
But what is Hamas asking for as part of this deal in exchange for releasing the hostages? That is it a state? What are they asking for that the prime minister has said we're open to that?
So the first phase of the deal includes an exchange of Hamas prisoners or Palestinian prisoners for hostages coming out. And it includes a substantial surge in humanitarian assistance into Gaza, hundreds and hundreds of trucks every day. And that's not because the United States or anyone else is trying to hold those back. It's because if you have a ceasefire in place, if there is calm in Gaza, it is that much easier to move very large quantities of humanitarian assistance around because you're not moving it around in a war zone. So those are the kinds of things that the people of Gaza stand ready to benefit from in this deal if Hamas would say yes.
You know, Jake, with the chaos throughout the Middle East, with the war against Hezbollah, very effective war against Hezbollah, with Syria falling, it seems that the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza has sort of fallen to the back pages. Talk about how extreme the suffering is right now, how absolutely extreme the suffering is for the people of Gaza.
Well, first, Joe, too many innocent people have died in Gaza as a result of the military activity there since October 7th. So you have civilian casualties in addition to the very large number of militant casualties of Hamas, including the killing of the very top.
Right. Now, I'm talking famine. I'm talking about
there's
children,
that piece.
and that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Hamas.
Right. So there's the death of innocent civilians, and then for those living in Gaza, there is acute suffering. They're going through hell. They are having a hard time accessing a sufficient amount of food, water, sanitation, medical care. And part of that is because in any war zone, it is difficult to get that stuff to people who are caught in the crossfire. In this particular case, it is especially difficult because of the nature of Gaza. It's an area people can't leave. Usually civilians can leave war zones. Here, Egypt's not going to let them leave. They're not going to go into Israel. So the unique and acute nature of the suffering here is something that we do not see it as unusual.
Is Israel doing everything it can do to allow humanitarian assistance to go in for children, for people suffering from famine, to get the sort of medical care that these people are not getting right now? Is Israel doing enough?
At many points over the course of the past year plus now, we have said Israel has to do more. And when I was just in Israel a few days ago, I kept pressing that. I said, yes, more is getting in, yet more has to get in. And we went through details in a way I don't think really any national security advisor ever has. What are the crossings? How many trucks? What's on the trucks? How do we maintain security along the route so those trucks aren't looted? Things that get down to the minute details, because those details can be the difference between someone getting to eat and not getting to eat, an innocent woman or child in Gaza.
Right.
So this is something we take very seriously. I believe we have made progress in the last month, but progress is not enough. We need to get to a point where everybody is getting the life-saving sustenance they need.
So, Jake, let's turn to Syria. After the stunningly swift fall of Assad, real questions as to what comes next. Fears that Syria could be a launching ground for terrorism again. Fears that the new government could backslide into a Taliban-esque situation. What is your read on this rebel group? Can they be trusted? Can they be governed with?
Well, first, just to recognize, the leader of this group was originally part of al-Qaeda in Iraq. Then he was part of ISIS. Then he broke with both of those two groups. And today he speaks about an inclusive, tolerant Syria that will respect the rights of minority communities, including Christians and Druze and Alawites, people who are not from the dominant Muslim faith that he comes from. But as President Biden said, we need to see words translated into deeds. There is an enormous opportunity now that the butcher Assad is gone for Syria to build a better future. But as you said, there are huge risks. And the single biggest risk I see is that ISIS comes back, because ISIS wants to take advantage of any vacuum or instability in Syria following a civil war. And so the U.S. has to be laser focused on suppressing the threat of ISIS. President Biden ordered the bombing of ISIS personnel and ISIS facilities within hours of Assad falling, and we're going to stay on top of that. But I will not sugarcoat it. This is a real threat, the threat of jihadism and terrorism returning in Syria because of what's happened, and it's incumbent on us and everyone in the region to push back hard on that.
Wow. Jake, to Joe's point on Gaza, we're into now over 400 days that they've been holding hostages. Gaza has been destroyed, the entire strip destroyed. What is the level of frustration like within the Biden administration over the conduct of the Israeli military operation, the way they waged war in Gaza and are still waging war, the conduct of the Israeli government in terms of the hostages cooperating to get a hostage release? What's the level of frustration with the current administration in Israel, and has it been damaged beyond repair?
So I think we have to step back and look at the context. Hamas launched this massacre on October 7th. Then it retreated not to military facilities or to the open field of battle to meet the Israeli Defense Forces. It retreated to schools and mosques and to hundreds of miles of tunnels under densely populated civilian areas. So Israel has had an added burden in fighting this war of dealing with an enemy that does not give a whit about civilians in Gaza, civilian Palestinians. But that doesn't lessen Israel's responsibility to minimize civilian harm and to maximize the flow of humanitarian assistance. And we have said over the course of the past 14 months that Israel should do more in both of those areas. I believe it's an American commandment and a Jewish commandment that every innocent life has value. And we have stressed that to the Israeli government over time. And when we have had our concerns, we've expressed those privately, and occasionally we have laid them out publicly. Now, on my most recent trip, I felt like, with respect to the hostage deal especially, the Israeli government is prepared to do this deal. I believe that. I think there have been points in time where they have focused on details and kind of pressed the point of various aspects of the deal. Now they want to see it done. And the real question is Hamas prepared to step up and do it?